Describe what you do here at the Center for Neuroacoustic Research.
We use very precisely tuned sound frequencies for healing, expanding states of mind, states of consciousness. And we use that in a variety of different ways. For instance, in one hand, you might have patients with various types of conditions who are coming to get their symptoms taken care of, or what their condition is. And at the other end, we've got people who at a certain point, you're no longer a person with problems trying to get fixed. You're somebody who's fixed, who is now asking, now what? And the now what is what I think sound has been used for in various cultures throughout the planet since the beginning, to wake people up. And I think healing is kind of the door prize, that my sense of awareness and my sense of aliveness and my sense of engagement with my life is intimately involved with my stress levels and my level of health. So the innovation that we've come up with is being able to take patients and hook them up to some pretty sophisticated medical monitoring systems that can monitor your brain, monitor your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is the part of you that kind of automatically controls all of your body systems and all your organs and all your glands. It's this feedback system in the brain and the nervous system that tells everything what to do. At some point, there's kind of a biological or organic intelligence that knows how to grow your body out of two cells and differentiate all those tissues into everything that you are, your organs and your glands and your structure and your meridians, and then make it all run on automatic without you thinking about it. And that part of me that is able to do that, while my rational thinking mind is up here talking with you, this thing is going on that's controlling my biochemistry and all my systems, and it's organizing the dance and making it all happen without me thinking about it. I think that is actually who I really am. That's my actual biological identity. It's not a visitor from outer space. It's an integral part of me. And I think that's the part that is described with various people who've had mystical experiences or spiritual revelations. The description has always got to do with who I think I am dropping away, and who remains is something that's profound and deep and perhaps ancient and connected to everything. The sense is that I'm not a visitor here, that I belong here, that I've grown out of this universe, and that the whole universe is a functioning organism that I'm part of. That's kind of the mystical experience idea. And it's happening before a thought. It's happening in the present moment. It's not a consideration. It's not a definition. It's something deep and profound. And people who come out from those types of experiences are never the same afterwards, because the perspective of what's important and the priorities of what my life really is all about changes. And when I'm not in that, when I'm more and more and more in the delusion that I am who I think I am, and that my life is made up of a series of waking up in the morning and getting in a traffic jam and driving to some job who doesn't pay me enough money, and I'm working for a boss who's got the emotional development of a 3-year-old. Does it sound familiar to you? And then at the end of that, I'm coming back in another traffic jam, and I'm coming home, and I'm cooking up a quick dinner, and there's the homework and the kids, and relaxation is television, watching the 7 o'clock news, how bad the world is. And then it's going to bed and setting the alarm, and then there's the next day. And someplace in the back of your mind, this is really what it's all about. This isn't it. My biological system was designed for an environment 150,000 years ago. where I wake up in the morning with the sun and I grab my spear and I go get breakfast. And breakfast is, I see some little rabbit or something and the rabbit sees me and we both have this fight or flight response. And we know what that fight or flight response looks like in the nervous system. The sympathetic branch of the nervous system goes on, signals the pituitary gland, it signals hormones that kicks the adrenal glands, and that kicks up my blood pressure, respiration, heart rate, galvanic skin response, pupillary dilation, suppresses pancreatic function, it releases extra glucose so I can fight for my life. And this cascade takes place in the rabbit and in me. And then I'm going to chase this rabbit around. And now it's just a contest of whose fire is going to burn out first, right? Whoever's most fit gets breakfast, and who's less fit is breakfast. And once I catch that rabbit, that's my work day. Because now I'm going to come back and I'm going to make some sandals and I'm going to cook the rabbit and I'm going to eat some berries and make babies. I mean, that's my work day. So now if we teleport that person into the middle of the 21st century, what do we have? We've got fumes coming from this carpet. We've got electromagnetic frequencies coming out of the walls. We've got 2,000 or more radio wave frequencies bombarding us. There's television frequencies and FM radio and AM radio and shortwave and military frequencies and microwaves. They're all bombarding my body. They're all artificial. My body was never designed to deal with them. My body was designed to dance with the universe through how my bioclocks are set. So my bioclocks are always trying to time my internal circadian rhythms to rhythms in the world. So I've got these mechanisms that are automatic. They're always looking for who's the most dominant drum beat in my environment to time myself to, because it saves energy to do so. And this is an ecological system in an ecological universe, always trying to get the most work with the least amount of energy expended. Once we understand the principle of the fact that my brain is always trying to time my body clocks to the world. For instance, there's a little gland in the center of your brain called the pineal gland that's sensitive to light-dark cycles, and it times to light-dark cycles in the world. So if I'm a woman, every 28 and a half days is the full moon, and I time my ovulation cycle based on that. And if I get out of step with my bioclock with the moon, then I have an irregular menstrual cycle. So that person might come to me and I will do something that will reset that bioclock in relation to the world. And I can do that by a number of methods. I use sound. You can use light. You can burn a little tiny light bulb over by the window during the 2 weeks of the new moon, fooling the pineal gland into thinking the full moon is still shining through the window. Seasonal affective disorder is the same kind of thing. A little gland is being sensitive to the length of the day, and the length of the day is always different. The summer equinox, which is we've just passed, is the longest length of the day, and then every day from that point on it gets a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. This little mechanism is timing my dance and setting my internal body thermostat to the correct season. If that gets out of whack, I've got seasonal affective disorder, and I can fix that by burning a full spectrum daylight bulb for 1 hour a day to reset the bioclock into thinking the day length is longer. With sound, I can do that by going directly into the brain and affecting brain centers through sympathetic resonance. So with the sound work, there are basically 3 different parallel tracks of how I'm using sound clinically with patients. Track 1 would be this idea of physical resonance, that I can use a very precisely tuned sound wave. For instance, I've got an electronic keyboard that looks like a piano, and I can tune between C and C sharp by 100 steps with a digital readout. So I can get really accurate to a couple of decimal points of what the frequency is. So it's not music therapy that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with sound therapy, where a sound frequency has a very specific, measurable, repeatable effect on how your body functions. And we can measure that with these medical monitoring devices. So I had mentioned the idea of the autonomic nervous system as the master control system that tells everybody what to do. We can visualize that system real time on a computer screen with a device called a heart rate variability. It's just a medical device that uses your heart information to look through the heart as a window into the autonomic nervous system that's controlling the heart and respiration and the rest of your systems. And because we can see that on a computer screen, we can see when it's not normal. It should do certain things in the first 5 minutes when you lay down on this table. And if it doesn't do those things, then something's wrong. And the problem with that something being wrong is if you've got something wrong with the central biocomputer that tells all your systems what to do and governs the synchronicity of how they all work together, if that governing system's got a problem, then every system it controls has a problem, right? And in reality, if my autonomic nervous system is only 95% efficient, then no system it controls can be better than 95%. It's kind of the big holistic idea here is, if you think about it for a second, is symptoms that I might have from my organs or my glands or my structure or my meridians or my chakras or whatever else you want to talk about. It's not their fault because nobody is functioning autonomously. Everybody is only doing what Central Command is telling them to do. And what Central Command is telling everybody what to do is how to dance together so that my next breath actually oxygenates my blood so that when my muscle reaches for a handful of oxygen, there's actually a handful there. And not a half a handful and not 95% of a handful, but a full handful. And for every percentage point that that synchronicity is off, I've got symptoms. There's a hidden battle going on in the world, and it's a battle of ideas. And the battle of ideas is between two main camps. And the battle is about what is health and what is disease and what do you do about it. What does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be the opposite of that, whatever word you want to use? Are you sick? Or do you have a disease? You know, disease kind of says it all in my book because it's dis-ease. It means that not a state of ease. And a state of ease is a state of health. And I've been in practice for 35 years now, and I've seen a lot of patients. I've seen a lot of crazy things. And I'm more firmly convinced every week that goes by that the ultimate cause of disease is stress. And it's not even so much the stress that's coming at you, but how you handle the stress. And so if we go back to my little story of 120,000 years ago, and what we're presented with now in the 21st century, it's going to take another 50,000 years of biological evolution for us to evolve to a point where we can handle the levels of stress that we're exposed to right now. I'm not even talking about the fact that we don't actually eat real food anymore. We're eating food-like products with a lot of chemicals dumped into them to make them look nice, but we're not growing food and taking it out of the ground and putting it in our mouth. Everything is hyper-processed, and if you're not eating living food, then you're kind of not living properly, you know. So this idea that that health is a physical thing, and it's an emotional thing, and it's a mental thing, and it's a spiritual thing. And I had a series of revelations through the course of my life, and to the course when I was going to school. I remember one time in particular, we were taking the central nervous system course. It's where you learn the brain and the wiring diagram of the brain and the nervous system and all that. And we were studying the spinal cord, and they had a cross-section of the spinal cord cut, and so you can see the end of the spinal cord, and the end of the spinal cord has got this kind of H-shaped gray mass in the center, and bundles of white matter around the outside, and the bundles of the white matter carry information back and forth to the brain. And the gray matter is, the part that thinks, like the gray matter. And now up here in your brain, gray matter is 1/8 of an inch thick of gray cells, and the rest is all white matter, cables that run back and forth. Now we know that's not even true. It's glia, and it's all kinds of other incredible stuff that's actually doing things. But I remember looking at this H-shaped shape in the middle of the spinal cord. I'm going, wait a second. What is gray matter doing in the spinal cord? I thought the gray matter was the thinking neurons, right? And they're up here. And so if there's gray matter in the spinal cord, does that mean, does that mean that the spinal cord is thinking, and the professor goes, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, the spinal cord does think in a very primitive way. The further down you go, the more primitive the thinking gets. The first time you put your hand on something really hot as a little kid, and as your finger is, cooking away, the pain signals, it's not pain yet, the signals are firing up into your spinal pool, routing up through one of those tracks into the thalamus, and then it goes out to its appropriate area of the brain. The brain interprets and says, oh, this is not good, so it routes it over to another area of the brain and sends a signal back down to contract the muscle and pull your hand away. And by that time, you're nice and burned. And the brain goes, you know what, from now on, we're not going to allow that process. We're just going to make the decision right at the spinal cord. It's going to come from the finger straight into the spinal cord. That gray matter is going to make a decision and jerk the hand back like that. It's called a reflex. So that was one of my early revelations of, wow, I got fooled by thinking that the brain was just the part that is encased in your skull. The brain, actually, it turns out, is the entire network that goes through the whole system. That entire thing is the brain. What's up here is a specialized portion of the brain for specific tasks and duties. So as time has gone on for me, the most profound experiences that I've had all have to do with the definitions dropping away. I got fooled again by the definitions. So once again, at one point when we were in dissection, I was told to dissect out the tendon for the biceps tendon. Here's the biceps muscle, here's the tendon, we have to find it, where it attaches to the bone, and I can't find it. I'm looking, and I can't quite tell where the tendon ends and the bone begins. And then I can't quite tell where the tendon ends and the muscle begins, because there is no place where it ends. There's no place where it begins, because it's all one tissue that gets thicker and thicker and thicker. So it becomes from skin, thicker to muscle, thicker to tendon, thicker to bone, but it's all the same stuff. It's like water that's gas and liquid and solid. Yeah. And it's the same thing with my physical body and my emotional body and my mental body. Those are definitions people put on something that never had definitions in the first place. And if that's so, it means it's not possible for me to have a physical problem without its emotional and its mental and its spiritual counterpart. It's just, what's the percentage mix of which is what? Is your physical symptom 85% physical and 15% emotional and 3% mental and 7%, it's one of those kind of things. So when you come into me with back pain, I know that that's the handle. That's your handle. Your handle is, I've got back pain, so I'm going to this doctor. In reality, your back pain is just one little piece in a huge network of things that are going on, because everything affects everything else, and what the body does best is recruit one system to help another system out. So while I will spend time touching your back and working on your back and checking things that run through your back as part of the theater of the healer-healee that is required, because if you came with back pain and I never looked at your back, I never touched your back, I never did anything for your back, and I was doing all this other stuff, you'd be going, well, what is this guy doing? It's like not working on my back. But in reality, there's emotional issues and spiritual issues and mental issues that are all going on there at the same time. And all those are governed by this autonomic nervous system. It's tying it all together, and it's weaving it all together. And so, for instance, if I take any person off the street, when you're sitting up like I'm sitting now, or if you're standing up, gravity is pulling the blood out of your brain and dropping it to the center of the earth. And then you die. So fortunately, you've got these little sensors in your carotid arteries that signal the pressure drop and cause the cascade of the sympathetic turning on and the pituitary and the adrenals and the blood pressure raising. So the blood pressure raises a little bit to keep it equalized. So that means I'm walking around with a little bit of sympathetic stress tone going. It's called gravity stress. But when I lay down on my back, I don't need that anymore. Lay down on my back is easiest to pump the blood on a horizontal plane, so I should go into this what's called baseline state, where respiration, heart rate go to the lowest baseline. And if it doesn't, then you've got a problem. What happens if your blood pressure stays up? Then there's a problem. You're running a fight or flight response that never stops. And that's what the heart rate variability gives me the ability to do. So now I can see your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic, on a computer screen functioning real time. And when I lay down, within 3 to 4 minutes, the sympathetic tone should collapse down because you don't need the gravity stress anymore because you're on a horizontal plane. Blood pressure, respiration goes to their baseline. But they're controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So we don't need to look at them anymore. We're looking further up the headwaters to who's telling them what to do. And we're watching that. We're seeing that stress. And what we're watching for is the stress to start to collapse down until it equalizes with the parasympathetic nervous system. And they should push in the clutch of your nervous system in a state called homeostasis. Homeostasis means homeo, myself, and stasis means a perfect state of rest. So perfect, zero stress, rest in the nervous system, pushing in the clutch, all the energy coming back to my reservoir. That should be my ground state. And what I've seen, in the last 20 years, I've hooked every single patient up to this system. That's thousands of patient visits. And only a handful of people in all those years have had a normal nervous system response. Everybody's got sympathetic on, and it doesn't relax. It doesn't turn off. After 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, it's on. And so I'm starting to realize, I think this must be some kind of 21st century condition. And the condition is my body is designed for a sprint, and I'm living in a marathon. And it's an impossible level of stress. The nervous system can't possibly meet that. So what it does is it comes up with a survival plan. And the survival plan is we're going to bullnose our way through the stresses with momentum. It's kind of like if I want to get to the top of a big hill in my car, part of my strategy is I'm going to build up some speed. And I'm going to hit that hill with some speed. And I'm not going to be inspired halfway up the hill to pull over to the side of the road and get a good night's sleep, right? Because part of my survival strategy is the momentum. So what do we end up with? We end up with an epidemic of chronic insomnia in the Western industrialized world, just from that one fact, because momentum is a survival tool. So what that does is it will not allow my nervous system to go to the deepest stage of delta brainwave sleep, where my physical body gets recuperated. And I race my engine all the time. And you can't do that. You can't race your engine all the time. You're burning up all your resources, and you're going to blow a gasket sooner or later. And the gaskets that blow in the Western world is stroke and heart attack, the two biggest ones. Following closely with that is high blood pressure and diabetes, high blood sugar. But when I see the predominant number of patients who come into me who have got this condition of persistent sympathetic tone, and that by definition means if I'm running a fight or flight response, I'm kicking my adrenals. My adrenals are kicking my blood pressure, And adrenaline suppresses pancreatic function to raise extra glucose to fight for my life. So by definition, I've got high blood pressure, high blood sugar. That means that the majority of people who are on blood pressure medication and pre-diabetes pills, it's a misdiagnosis. There is no problem with the pancreas. And the blood pressure, which nobody knows why they've got the high blood pressure, it's just, we don't know, but take this pill. It's a persistent sympathetic tone because I'm running this fight or flight response all the time. So when we can have you in a condition where we can see the sympathetic nervous system on, my innovation is to expose the body to these precisely tuned sound waves until I find a sound wave that makes the sympathetic nervous system push in the clutch. And it's similar to the physics of why a wine glass vibrates when you sing the white note. So I just happen to have a wine glass here. This wine glass represents a atomic resonance as a standing wave that appears to be the shape, density, and mass. But we kind of understand intellectually that the glass is made of molecules, and molecules are made of atoms, and the atoms are made of protons, electrons, and neutrons, and those are made of quarks and charms and hadrons and leptons and cube particles and z particles. And at some point when you break the smallest particle open, there's nothing inside except energy pattern relationships in the state of vibration. So it's an illusion. It's actually a standing wave, a nested standing waves. And so I want to sing the correct note that's going to make this wine glass vibrate. How do I know what note to sing? She's shaking her head. She doesn't know. And that's its note. I ping the wine glass. That frequency is as fundamental resonant frequency as an atomic state. And if I match that with my voice and I sing it loud enough, we'll set up what's called a coupled oscillator pair, where my vocal cords vibrating back and forth are impacting this through air molecules, and this is moving back and forth in unison. And therefore, the wine glass and my vocal cords are now forming this pair. And as I build up the volume level, eventually this can't contain its own energy anymore, and it will explode. But just before that moment, the glass is in the highest possible energy state it can be in before it can't hold it anymore and blows up. And if it wasn't a wine glass, if it was a cell in your fifth lumbar disc and you've got a disc problem, you've got injured disc cells, then I can precisely tune sound waves accurate to a few decimal points until I hit the cells that make up the fifth lumbar disc, and I can make them sing, and I can boost them up to their highest possible energy state until before they explode. And essentially that's a healing state, because physiologically when your body goes into a healing state, your cells increase their metabolism, and they increase their intake of food, expelling of waste, and rebuilding of tissue. So by using these precisely tuned sound waves, we can boost the cells into their highest possible energy state, which is an energy state they can't get to on their own. So we've created a super healing state in the body using physical resonance. And we could do that with various components. We could do it with vertebra, we could do it with cranial bones, we could do a craniosacral treatment, which is sound waves. We could influence functioning of organs or glands. We can influence emotions. And the beauty of this is we can influence the autonomic nervous system. So that means that we're in a position to use precisely tuned sound waves where your autonomic nervous system is now the wine glass. The problem is we can't ping you, right? So I can't I can't do that. So back again, if I was a scientist and this glass was in a plexiglass box and I couldn't ping it, how would I find out what note the wine glass is tuned to? I could use my voice as a sweep generator. I could go, oh, and as I get within the sweet spot, we'd see it start to, and if I was a scientist, I'd have some fancy sensors on the glass that measured its vibration, and I'd be watching a computer screen that showed me the maximum spike of vibration of the glass at that moment, and I wouldn't be using my voice. I'd be using some scientific tone like a sine wave. And so that's exactly what I did. I created a program with a sine wave, a man-made tone with no harmonics, a sine wave sweeping through every frequency from 20 hertz to 500 hertz in the course of 4 minutes or so. And I'm watching this heart rate variability monitor with your nervous system stuck in overdrive with a sympathetic on and it's not moving. I'm sweeping these sound waves through a special sound table with low frequency transducers built into it, so the sound's coming in your body. And I'm watching your autonomic nervous system to see when it responds to the sound wave. And as the sound wave gets within the sweet spot for you, then we'll see the stress starting to collapse and collapse and collapse until it hits this homeostasis zero stress point, which you haven't been able to get to for some case decades. And when I hit that spot, now the body is in the proper position where there's zero stress in the system, no energy is being used for any task, all the energy is now back in my reservoir, and now the brain is in this beautiful position where it can utilize that energy to do whatever it wants to do. And so what's going to be the most important thing that it wants to do is obey the two big rules of the body. Rule number one, survive at all costs. Rule number two, do no self-harm unless it breaks rule number one. In other words, if I get my leg caught in a trap, I have permission to chew my foot off in order to save my life. I can do self-harm as long as it's obeying rule number one, right? So it's pretty simple. It's a simple idea, complicated in its execution, so to speak. So that means that if I sweep the sound wave and I find the frequency that pushes in the clutch, as soon as the clutch is pushed in and my survival needs are met, now we have the conditions for civilization and art and music and film. And we can't appreciate nature. We can't appreciate beauty. We can't have intellectual dialogue. We can't have abstract thought or civilization until our survival needs are met. Because survival needs kind of always grab the energy first. By definition, you are mobilizing resources from your gut, from your elimination system, from your immune system, from your higher brain centers, and putting that energy in your muscles to fight for your life. That means your memory is not all that good, your concentration is down, you can't digest your food properly, you can't eliminate toxins properly, and your immune system is compromised chronically, all the time. And as soon as that condition goes into this push in the clutch phase of homeostasis, all the energy is back where it belongs. And the blood pressure goes back down, the blood sugar goes back down. And then people tell me, well, you cured my diabetes. I'm going, excuse me, please don't tell people that, because it was a misdiagnosis in the first place. So now we get to this point where once I find this frequency that pushes in the clutch, if I expose you to that, the clutch pushes in. If I burn it on a CD and you take it home and you listen with headphones, it pushes in the clutch. And every time the clutch pushes in, it gets stronger to do that activity. Every time your nervous system goes to homeostasis, you're muscling that function up. Like everything else in the body works that way. You know, if I use my brain for a certain purpose, those pathways get big. If I go to a gym and I work out, then my muscles get big. People ask me, well, how many sessions do you need? So for me, it's kind of like, how bad is your situation? How long has it been there? How many symptoms do you have? How messed up are you? And how long it's going to take to go to the gym. It's not like you go to the gym and you work out. You get this trainer, you work out, and you work yourself into a hussy, and you go back home and you look in the mirror and go, well, gyms don't work. You got to kind of keep at it. You're really retraining a function in the autonomic nervous system to be able to push in its clutch. The beauty here is that the stress-related conditions that have started to arise, that are creating a deficit, force the body to recruit another system to help this system out that's getting too stressed out. Now we've got two. This guy's going to get stressed out because he's doing his job plus a little bit of this guy's job. So he's going to start getting symptoms. And this guy's going to help him, and he's going to help him, and he's going to help him. Pretty soon you got this network of symptoms and networks of systems most of who are compensations for the major problem. And you don't need to spend any time or energy working on any of those, because when you fix this one, they're all going to go away. If this one's fixed, this guy doesn't need to be recruited to help him, and he doesn't need to help him, and he doesn't need to help him, and it all just kind of cascades away. So the beauty of the system is to go straight to the top of the headwaters, fix that, and watch the cascade collapse through all the systems. And when I'm standing at the fork, I've got two choices. I've got this choice here and this choice here. And this choice here is using all the talents that I'm born with to their max. It's my dharma, it's my path, it's what makes the best use of me, it's what gets my juices flowing, it's me the happiest person in the world to do this and get paid for it. But it's got no visible means of support of how it could possibly work. It's a tightrope with no net, no logical means to explain how I could ever be an artist and make it. And at this side is all of my mentors and the adults in my life who are whispering in my ear to stop being so naive, grow up and get a job, right? So when I choose this path, that's when my symptoms begin, because it's a wounding of my spirit. And for every percentage point that my spirit is not walking the path that's the best use of me, I am out of step with the universal dance of why I'm here. And eventually I silence in myself that quest, which is, why am I here? What is this all about? What's the whole business? What's the purpose of waking up in the morning? What does the universe make the best use of me? What's the purpose of my life? Early on, that kind of just gets discarded, and I get my job, and I'm working for retirement, and I'm getting a portfolio, and I'm marrying the right person for the wrong reasons, and all of these stresses are building up until it manifests physically or emotionally or mentally. So when a person has a revelation of the physical detox, and I'm getting cleaner, emotional detox, I'm getting cleaner still, self-defeating belief systems, I'm getting cleaner still. You know, I'm 3 years old and mommy and daddy get a divorce. And 3-year-olds think that everything in the world happens because of them. So therefore, it must be my fault that daddy walked out the door. And what could I have possibly done that was so horrible? And when I can't come up with an answer, I assume it's just me. It's just who I am that caused this situation. And therefore, my punishment for such a horrible thing is to put myself in jail for the rest of my life. And that jail is going to look like I have a ceiling that will be how much health I get to have in my life, and how much money I get to have in my life, and how much love I get to have in my life. And later on in my life, when I start bumping my head against that ceiling, my unconscious mind has the power to come out and sabotage my life in any way necessary in order to keep me in my box. I can sabotage my job, I can sabotage my health, I can make sure I'm distracted at the right moment to have a head-on collision, I can sabotage my relationships, I can do whatever's necessary to keep me in my box. So when that stage happens, a release, where I relive, wow, that was not my fault. That had nothing to do with me. That charge is blown off. And when that charge is blown off and my box disappears, then all of those opportunities that have been waiting in the wings to hand me these opportunities that it couldn't because I was in a box are now there. And my life begins to open up in these crazy ways that are a series of serendipitous synchronicities. It means that the lights start turning green. The doors start opening by themselves. The wrong phone caller is the right person. It just becomes this amazing cascade of events that seem to be happening all of their own, where all of this stuff starts to get applied to me. And that, to me, is back in the dance. That's what the dance with the universe looks like, where my job is, when I'm standing at the fork, my job is not to figure out how I'm going to make this spiritual path work. My job is only to say this one or this one. If I choose this one, it's the universe's job to figure out how that's going to happen, not my job. And really that means that my choice there, and this choice happens every moment, everything that happens in your life is you coming to a new, how do I make the exact right choice in this situation? Opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. Shall I get the blue dress or the gray dress? Should it be this way or that way? Should I get this job or that way? Should I say it this way or should I say it that way? It's endless. It's a way of wending our way through and finding the right way each time, which brings me closer to my spiritual core and brings me closer to perfect healing and health in my body and my mind and in my spirit. So when I see the patients have that revelation, the revelation of teleporting back to the first moment where they first made the wrong decision of which choice, where the pain began, and now make it the correct choice. Oh my God, I should have been an artist instead of a CPA, or whatever. Everything changes. Now, some people get that one by themselves, near-death experiences, dying on an operating table and coming back. When you come back, all your priorities have shifted, and you now clearly see those forks every single time. You see, and usually these people come back with a very powerful imperative for what am I here for, that I'm here for something very specific and I'm on it. To me, that is a very high level of health. And it's so far from some method for just alleviating my pain, because pain is multifaceted. So that's how I'm using this heart rate variability to find a frequency that balances the nervous system, which is the core that tells everybody what to do, that can help me to use my energies correctly to re-rectify and hit the reset button for the nervous system and bring me back to my core. And at some point, I'm no longer a broken person trying to get fixed. I'm a fixed person asking, now what? And the now what is this path thing. And then the sound work that I'm doing is more in alignment of how I think sound has been used in various cultures throughout history. Every culture has got a sound tradition. And the sound traditions all have to do with waking up, of clearly putting me bang in the present moment where I can see this path and helping me to make the right decision. Because basically that decision is, do I believe that the universe is a hostile environment where I have to hack my way through and fight my way to get my morsel of meat? Or is the universe a beneficent place whose duty is to say yes to me when I make the right decision and open the doors and just make it happen, where I now have entered into a symbiotic relationship with the world? And it's my choice. I can make that choice. And people who have made that choice always report the same thing. The universe dances back. Doors open up, lights turn green, synchronicities start to happen. It's this amazing kind of thing starts to take place. The second avenue of how I'm using sound is this concept of brainwave entrainment. And that's got to do with bioclocks. So my bioclocks are looking always for the drum beat to time my clocks to. And there's a science that governs that whole thing. It's called the science of coupled oscillators. It's the propensity of everything in the universe to want to dance together, to synchronize up. And it governs subatomic particles and supergalactic nebula, and why your heart cells beat together when they touch, and why fish swim in schools and birds fly in flocks, and synchronicities. Everything in the universe is dancing to the same drummer, but nobody's beating the drum except everybody by automatic consensus. So way back in the beginning of the primordial ooze, right, when it was the green slime, and there's these little single-celled organisms down in there, right, battling it out for the morsels of food, right? something happened at some point. Something happened. Nobody knows what it was, but something took place. And the little single-cell organisms realized that it was much better to form symbiotic relationships and cooperate than to compete. Cooperation is better than competition. And so that became the first multicellular organisms, which eventually evolved and crawled out of the slime and came on land and became you and me, right? And now we've got this world of multicellular organisms that are battling it out over the little morsel of food. And once again, something will happen. And none of us know what it is, but it's inevitable because it's the way nature works. At some point, humanity will realize that it's better to form a global symbiotic relationship than it is to compete. Right now, we're still of a mindset as a species that it's a hostile environment and we have to battle our way. There's a section that's growing larger and larger and larger in the world of people who realize that a symbiotic relationship is where it's at. A symbiotic relationship with each other and with the planet. At one point I did a technique that I picked up from hanging out with Richard Bandler, who's one of the two guys who developed neurolinguistic programming. He's kind of a crazy man, but a genius. And he came up with a phobia cure where he would hypnotize you, bring you back to a traumatic event, and have you run the film backwards. And run it backwards faster and faster and faster until it was the Keystone Cops with broken things reassembling themselves and flying back up. And something about that erased the emotional charge of the trauma or the phobia. And it was called his 5-minute phobia cure. You know, like you'd handle the snake afterwards, no big deal. So I brought it back and I thought, I could do that with sound. If I could take this profound self-defeating belief system that we discovered for you, I can do it in a special sampling keyboard so I can spread your voice over all the keys, and when I play those keys, it'll speed up or slow down the recording. If I play them way up here and I play a bunch of them, I can make it sound exactly like birds chirping. And if I speed it up by more and more octaves, eventually your voice will sound like crickets. And higher it sounds like dolphins. And then I'm thinking to myself, you know, what would happen if I took cricket sounds and slowed them down? They sound like birds. And if I take bird sounds and slow them down, they sound like dolphins. And if I take dolphin sounds and slow them down, they sound like people singing. So that became, well, no wonder we can't talk to the dolphins. We're talking at the wrong speed. But the idea here was that it appeared to me to be like Jung's collective unconscious, that it's all, once again, all one thing, like the gray matter in the spinal cord. The brain is not just up here, it's spread through the whole system. That the world is not an infinite number of little things with definitions. That when I have a true mystical experience, the definitions fall away, but the world is still here. And I see a relationship that's different. So the idea that I can take this bioclock idea that I know is a constantly running thing your body is doing to save energy, and I can expose you to a sound that's pulsing and pulsing at a brainwave speed, then that becomes the drum beat that your brain is looking to as the most dominant drum beat in your environment to time itself to. So the original research of this was done by a guy named Gerald Oster, and he published an article in Scientific American in 1973. It was the October 1973 issue of Scientific American called Auditory Beats in the Brain. He showed that if he took a sound pulse and pulsing at a brainwave speed, hooked you to an EEG machine, he could see your brainwaves would begin to change from wherever they were and slow down to match the speed of this sound pulse, thereby changing your state of consciousness at will using a sound wave pulsing at a brainwave speed. Then he did it, so that means that probably the earliest use of sound for changing consciousness would be, say, a shamanic drumming, right? That's about right. And I've taken this, I put it in my recording studio, I've done spectral analysis of it. It's about 4.5 cycles per second, and that is a theta brainwave state. Theta is where you go when you're dreaming. And that means that I can take you from a beta rapid brain activity state, where we are right now, and slow your brain waves down to this target drumbeat in theta and put you into a hypnagogic daydream state in just a few minutes without you going to sleep, which is a classic definition of a trance state, hypnotic state, and do it in a few minutes. And so what he brought it to a scientific way, where he took sine waves, again, these man-made tones, and he combined the tones together, 2 of them, to create something called binaural beats, where you've got 2 tones slightly out of tune. And if they're slightly out of tune, they create a modulation interference pattern between them, which you hear as a wah-wah. It's this modulation. So I've got a speaker here and a speaker here, and I've got 100 hertz and 105 hertz. I'll hear a 5 cycle a second wah-wah. The difference between the two. It's air molecules colliding together. And then my brainwaves will time themselves to that, because we've got a big red button, a survival button the body uses. We're dealing with rule number 2 here. I'm doing self-harm if I waste life energy. Right? I might as well cut my wrist and let myself bleed out, because if I don't conserve energy, I'm dying. So rule number 2 is time your body clocks to a drum that's already beating to save energy. So because it's such a big program, I can commandeer it. And if I can commandeer it, I've got your whole system under my control. So now if we take these binaural beats creating the pulse, but we do something like put headphones on. So now I've got headphones on, and I've got 100 hertz, and I've got 105 hertz, and I hear this 5 cycle a second pulsing, and my brain waves start to time themselves to it. The question is, where is this pulse coming from? Because there's no longer air molecules colliding together, right? Unless you've got air between your ears, right? So now something else is going on. What is it that's going on? It's a true quirk of neurological processing. It's another trick of how the brain works. It's another survival button that the brain uses to save energy. And that survival button is, if I can jump to a conclusion before you do, then you're breakfast, right? And so I'm anticipating things all the time. I'm making these mental calculations in my biocomputer all the time. So if you're the rabbit and I see you and you see me and our cascade begins and I'm chasing you around, part of your strategy is going to be to dart right and dart left at random, right? And my strategy is to watch the minutiae of your muscle contractions to predict which way you're going to zig so that I can jump and be there at the moment you arrive, right? That's how that function goes. It's the function behind Wheel of Fortune. I'm going to buy a vowel, and I'm going to get a consonant, and all of a sudden, the spaces, it jumps in my brain fills in the details, which is that exact function I'm talking about. So that's what's happening with the headphones on. So now I've got my headphones on, and I've got 100 hertz, 105 hertz, and a 5 cycle a second pulse. This hemisphere is listening to this ear, and this hemisphere is listening to this ear, crossing over. And because the 2 ears are hearing separate data that the other ear is not hearing, which is something that doesn't exist in nature. There's never a time where this ear can't hear what this ear is hearing, right? The sound's coming from this way, it creates a sonic shadow, and the sounds have to bounce off the world to reach this ear a split second after this one, so my brain knows, oh, it's that way. But other than that, there's never a time. We've just created a new condition the body's not used to. And that means that this hemisphere and this hemisphere, 100, I'm hearing 105 and I'm hearing 100. And therefore, my brain knows the laws of physics. Because remember, someplace deep down inside of you designed this whole business, right? If you crack deeper than your own personal biocomputer that knows how to grow your body out of 2 cells, deeper down is a collective unconscious that knows how to grow a planetary ecosystem that your body grew out of. And deeper than that is a larger collective consciousness that knows how to grow a solar system that the Earth was grown out of, that your body was grown out of. And so this idea that the 2 hemispheres know that the Wawa exists and is anticipating that it should be there. So it manufactures it, jumps to a conclusion, makes it happen. The reality never takes place because the brain doesn't understand that there's no air between your ears. It's never had this experience before, so it jumps to a conclusion that's about to be there and never arrives. The brain manufactures the pulse out of nowhere, moment by moment, and then entrains itself to that pulse that doesn't exist. So this means it's an active brain entrainment process as opposed to a passive one through speakers, and you get added benefits. When you've got the headphones on, it means that in order for these 2 to compare notes, to come up with what the speed of this pulse should be, the hemispheres have to synchronize their activity electrically across the corpus callosum, and that means we get an additional phenomenon called hemisphere synchronicity. We're synchronizing all of the electrical activity between the 2 hemispheres. And in neuroscience, we know that that is a rare event. That doesn't happen too often. This idea of synchronicity of the hemispheres is a highly desirable state. We all want it. It's where we go when the aha moment takes place, when the epiphany happens, when the problem gets solved, when the new original idea drops into your brain. Anybody who is creative or who is an artist of any kind, or a musician, or you know that your best work always comes when you get out of the way. When small mind gets out of the way and this part takes over, the good stuff happens. So this idea that we're forcing the hemispheres to jump to a conclusion, forcing the hemisphere synchronicity to take place, and now when I listen to a soundtrack with these pulses built into it that are divided right and left, that are forcing hemisphere synchronicity. By the way, when that synchronicity happens, it comes together, it falls right apart. 2 hemispheres start doing their thing again. So it's a timeless instant. But when you've got headphones on, you've got with these binaural beats, and you've got EEG on, you've got hemisphere synchronicity the whole time. The whole time this is going on, the brain is forced to do this jumping to a conclusion thing. It's forcing hemisphere synchronicity for prolonged periods of time for the first time in our biological evolution. Now we have a whole new thing going on. Now we are going to a gym for synchronicity of the hemispheres that puts me smack dab in the middle of what makes human beings different from any other being on Earth. Our ability to be creative, our ability to imagine, our ability to tap our unique core, problem-solving, creativity, insight, all of that is where that exists. There's a relationship between using binaural beats to cause the synchronicity and entrain your brainwaves to a very specific state, to alter your state of consciousness, that is related to this heart rate variability thing. A quick example, I'm going to lay you down on this table, put some wrist sensors onto you, fire up my heart rate variability device, and I'm going to have this sound sweep going through the table. I'm going to watch this stress response collapse and I'm going to make a note of what frequency this is. And I know from the physics of the wine glass that any octave of this note is going to make the wine glass vibrate. So if this is your autonomic nervous system, if I find the frequency that rings it, if I play any octave of that frequency, it's still going to ring it. I'm still going to get homeostasis. So if I whip out my calculator, and I calculate all the octaves of your autonomic nervous system. And let's say that the frequency that makes it ring is 400 hertz. Then 200 hertz is going to do it, 100 is going to do it, 50 is going to do it, 25 is going to do it, 12.5 is going to do it, 6.75 is going to do it, 3.125 is going to do it, 1.5 something is going to do it. You see where I'm going with this? Human hearing is between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Anything below 20 hertz is not sound anymore. But my calculator says there's a bunch of octaves still. And what are those? They're brain waves. They're beta, alpha, theta, delta brainwave frequencies that are accurate to a few decimal points. That means that if I use binaural beats set to precisely that brain frequency pattern that's a perfect octave of your autonomic nervous system, then if I expose you to that with headphones, I should be able to get homeostasis from a state of mind instead of the sound coming through the table. I should be able to pick the lock of a neural program that makes homeostasis happen, and indeed that is so. There is beta, alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, a whole bunch of different brainwave frequencies. As long as they're a perfect octave of the frequency that causes homeostasis with the autonomic nervous system, then if we entrain your brainwaves to any of those exact state accurate to a few decimal points, then we pick the lock of a neural program your brain already uses to bring you to this state. My take on that is that that's what sleep is all about. Sleep is a series of nested programs your brain runs at night, and as the brainwaves are slowing down and they hit that exact frequency, that's the combination lock that opens up the safe, where the program comes out and makes that program run in alpha, healing my mental body, in theta, healing my emotional body, because that's what dreaming is all about, in delta, healing my physical body. That means I can target specific brain states to heal specific things. It also means that I can go into the spiritual realm. I can go into epsilon or gamma or hypergamma states. Extremely high states of meditation take place, enlightenment, so to speak, and pick the lock of that neural program and be in a perfect state of peace and rest and safety, where there's zero stress in the autonomic nervous system, where my hemispheres are in their eureka mode, floating there, in a very specific state of consciousness that unlocks my doors. It's scientific enlightenment, using everything we know about medical monitoring devices that can monitor the brain map the nervous system, and stack that together with say, ancient knowledge of how sound has always been used to wake people up, stood the test of time, and get healing along there as the door prize, all rolled into one wonderful thing. And the only thing that's missing is what sound are you going to use? What would be the best sound to plug through the sound table? A flute or a cello, or no, the best thing that you could possibly use would be something that's primordially recognizable to your unconscious mind. Something that would wake up the deepest part of your unconscious mind with pattern recognition of something that's profound. The sound of your own voice. Right, so at a certain point I find this frequency that makes this thing happen and balances your systems out. And I'm going to play that as a reference tone, and you're going to sing it. And I'm going to record your voice singing it with special highfalutin psychoacoustic 3D microphones that you wear on your head. And now I've got a recording of your voice singing your tone. And I'm going to do some fancy stuff with it in my computer and loop it, cut a little section out where it's perfect, loop that, and stick it in my keyboard and play it in different octaves. I'm going to play it in all these low octaves that you can't recognize as your voice anymore. It's like the cosmic ohm sound. But your body can recognize it, because someplace in your biological organic intelligence knows how to read the blueprint to differentiate the tissues, including your vocal cords, based on some quantum energy pattern that's manifested as standing waves in your system and stamped into all your systems with the harmonics and overtones that gives your voice its timbre, why you sound like you, right? I can have you sing this tone, I can scope it out on with a spectral analysis on my computer. I can see all the spikes of harmonics and overtones that makes your voice sound like you. They never change. How do you think the US government can tell who's talking on a cell phone from a satellite? It's a voice print analysis. So if a computer can do it, how about your biocomputer can certainly do it because it designed it in the first place. So now we can use these low frequencies coming through the table, that's your voice, in low registers that really rock and roll your body. But inside that is all the harmonics and overtones that really mesh with your tissues and cause a subconscious pattern recognition in the deepest part of your unconscious mind, where the answers reside. What's wrong with me? What to do about it, in what order, and why the hell am I here? What's it all about? For me, I had an experience. Of course, I do all these crazy things to myself, you understand. I do things to myself I would never do to anybody else. But I had an experience on the table where when I was born, I almost died from anemia. So I was saved from that. But then I couldn't breastfeed because I was allergic to mother's milk. And so I was fed on formula. So here I am on the table having this revelation thing, cosmic nature of reality. And for some reason, this floats up in my mind. What kind of person is allergic to mother's milk? I mean, what's that all about? What's the cosmic metaphor of that one? You know, why would you be allergic to mother's milk? And Cabango, I had this experience of, I was in the Galactic Olympic swim race, going for the gold. Of course, that's what sperm is, right? The sperm is 50 million other sperm. It's the Galactic Olympics, and the prize is the egg. And I was the sperm that got there first. I won. I won the gold. It's like, oh, wow, I can't believe it. It's like, I never looked at myself as gold medal material. I mean, there's got to be some horrible mistake here. This is a mistake. It's a mistake. I'm not gold medal material. This can't be right. But the prize is so precious. The prize is getting a body in the biggest game in the universe. This is it. This is the game of champions. And in this game, there's no bronze medals here. There's no silver medals here. We're all gold. Every single one of us is gold medal winner. We're all here. Even the bum in the gutter, right? That means that we all know what it takes to pull the energy from your toenails and go the superhuman effort to get what you want. We all have that in us. And that's what I'm having as a revelation on this table, except I don't believe it about me. I believe that this was some horrible mistake, but the prize is so precious that I don't speak up. And therefore, in my heart of hearts, I believe that I'm a thief in heaven, that I cheated my way in, and that everybody else that I know is legitimate, but I'm not. I've got a dark secret that I can't let anybody know about, right? The profound relationship between a baby and its mother, suckling on the breast with mother's milk, then that's too good for me because I cheated, right? You don't get to have that. I'm in my box here, and that's one thing you don't get to have. That's why I was allergic to mother's milk. The revelation's happening on the table. I know this is true. It may or may not be true. I know it's true. But then I realized how my whole life is spun from that, why the relationships didn't work, why the jobs didn't work out, why the finances never happened, why the whole business was messed up, was because I had a dark secret. So the big revelation for me there was to realize that there's no cheating in the universe. It doesn't happen. The revelation for me was, wow, this is what it's like to be a gold medal winner. That every gold medal winner who's ever won the gold has had that same experience, that you can't believe it about yourself. And once I realized that, once I had that revelation, I'm, off the table. I mean, I couldn't lay there. It was like, oh, wow, this is really big. And then those synchronicities began to happen for me. So those are the three kind of avenues of how I'm using sound. This idea of physical resonance to rock and roll your body and do things and control your master computer program in your brain, and brain entrainment to control and orchestrate specific states of consciousness that might align with that. And this idea of primordial sounds, sounds that have an ability to tap subconscious recognition patterns at my unconscious mind and align all those three together, and the magic door tends to open.
Tell me some of the conditions that you've healed. Is there ever been a spontaneous healing situation?
So people ask me, what kind of conditions can you heal with this? And my answer at this point is anything that has stress as its cause. And as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much everything. Now, I used to, my one caveat, well, except for, genetic conditions. But now that's not true either. We already know that if you have a twin sister and you've both got genetic markers for ovarian cancer, and your grandmother had it, and your aunt had it, it skipped your mother, and your twin sister gets it, but you don't. How come? How come she got it and you didn't? You've got identical genes. What made hers express and not yours? Stress. Stress is what makes it express. And if that's true, if stress can cause it to express, then what if we apply an anti-stress technique? Could we make it go into remission? And the answer is yes, of course we can. My first experience with spontaneous remission was, and this was not something that I did, but it clued me into a process that I later began pursuing. I had this guy who is a wealthy businessman, and every hair was in place, and he always wore these fancy clothes and came in his limo. He always rode roughshod over everybody and made an ass of himself. And we formed this great working relationship, and then he didn't come anymore. And my nurse started calling around, found out that he went back for his annual checkup. They found an inoperable brain tumor, and they gave him 6 months to live. Then a few weeks later, my nurse comes in and says, Mr. Jones is here. He's here to say goodbye. I'm going, So I go out into the waiting room, and I didn't recognize this guy. He's standing and laughing and telling jokes to the front desk person. And he's got a t-shirt on, a Bermuda shorts, hair's kind of messed up. I'm going, whoa. And so I shook hands with him, and he said, yeah, I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm on my way to Florida. He says, when I got my cancer death sentence, I thought you'd better do whatever it is you wanted to do with your life in the time you've got left. So what he always wanted to do is go down to Florida, buy himself a boat, take people on excursions, and live on the beach. So he, cashed out of his business and his stocks and bonds, and he sold everything, and he bought himself a boat, and he bought himself a house down on the beach in Florida, and he's on his way. And I'm going, good for you. Good for you. And he said, yeah, I went yesterday for my final checkup. No cancer. The doctor actually said to me that maybe we were looking at the wrong x-rays. And I'm going, wow, I've heard about this, but here's this guy right in front of me who I know, who's had a spontaneous remission. And there's something profoundly changed about this guy. He is not the guy I used to know. This guy has got his act together. He's relaxed. He's enjoying life. He's happy. He's got a clear vision about what he wants to do that's going to make him happy. It's like, wow. This was going in my mind, and I must have been standing there with my mouth open or something. And he said, yeah, this is the way I felt. And he said, and then I realized that he said, what surprised me was not so much that he said I didn't have any cancer anymore. What surprised me was I realized I didn't need it anymore. That statement has stayed with me the rest of my life, because I kept thinking about that. I didn't need it anymore. This guy couldn't have possibly come up with an excuse good enough for his family, his friends, his business associates, his bankers, his investment stockbrokers. They would have had him committed. If he said, hey, I'm going to chuck this all sell law and go down and buy a boat and a house and live on the beach, they would have thought he was certifiable. But as soon as he got inoperable cancer and he's going to die, then everybody's going, well, you really should go off and do whatever it is you want to do for the rest of your life. It was the perfect out. And then once he sold it all and he had it all done and he's on his way, he doesn't need the cancer anymore. So that got sloughed. You know, it's part of an inscrutable part of reality that once again is like the gray matter in the spinal cord. We're once again stuck by the definitions of what we think this is all about. And we always go back to our default position, which is that I live in this body, I'm X number of years old, and I have a job, and I do this thing, and I've got these patent place stories in my life, and the world is falling apart, and that's not what it is at all. It's, we are spiritual beings inhabiting a vibrational plane of standing waves that look like people and things, but it's not. It's a whole other ballgame going on. It's a test of my belief systems of what the universe and I are here to do together. And that's borne out in physics. One of my good friends was a guy named Cleve Baxter, who was on the faculty of a graduate school research center for 6 years. And he's the father of lie detection. This guy lives in his lab, by the way. It's got a big old plant, and the plant's dying because they forgot to water it. And then he decides to turn that into a scientific experiment. How long does it take for the water to get from the root to the topmost leaf? Well, let's wheel in the lie detector machine on this cart with, you know, the chart recorder needles that you take blood pressure and respiration and heart rate and galvanic skin response and muscle tension, things like that. So he's thinking, if I take the galvanic skin response thing, which measures when increased sweat, more water is more conductive, then he's thinking when the water actually gets into the leaf, it'll make it more conductive and it will show on my thing, right? So he hooks the leaf up and he damages the leaf, and his lie detector machine has a stress response. It's going, wait a second, that's not possible. The plant doesn't have a nervous system. It can't have a stress response. So what the heck is this? And so now there's a full-blown experiment, which resulted in a book called The Secret Life of Plants. And the idea here is that he hooks the leaf up carefully, and he takes his knife out of his pocket, reveals the blade, cuts the leaf, and it has and it screams. It has a stress response. And the next day he comes in to reproduce the experiment to make sure it's not a fluke. And he takes his knife out, he pulls out the blade, and he reaches for the leaf, and it screams. He didn't cut it yet. The plant is somehow anticipating his intention of harm. It's picking up his intention of harm. And day by day, he has to do less to get the scream. Now he reaches in, reveals the blade, and it screams. Next day he reaches for a knife, it screams. The next day he thinks about reaching into his pocket, and there's a scream. And the next day he comes in, nothing happens. He's going, well, wait a second. Pulls out his knife, nothing happens. Pulls out the blade, nothing happens. Grabs the leaf, nothing happens. He's going, what's different? What's different is it's an empty exercise, and I have no intention of harm. So then he actually had to cut the leaf to start this process over. We became friends, and then I took his course. And his present work at that time was The Secret Life of Your Cells, a new book. Now he's taking leukocyte scrapings from the inside of your cheek, living cells, puts them in a test tube of saline solution at body temperature so they're alive, puts a silver electrode in there. That's the galvanic skin thing. And now he's got a camera pointed at you to a monitor room. He takes you and he puts you in another part of the building behind closed doors, hooked up to a lie detector machine with a camera pointed at you. And he's in the monitor room looking at these two screens. He's got a little thing with a red button that passes an electrical current through the cells and damages them. And you have a stress response 350 feet away in another room. So what the heck is going on here? I mean, how is it possible for stressing your cell here and you have a response over here? So then he did another experiment. So he'll take you and put you 350 miles away and time it against the atomic clock in Cheyenne, Wyoming, accurate to 1 second in 10,000 years, and see how long this takes. And that's when he found out that it doesn't take place in time. As soon as I do this, you have a response. No time is involved. And so now what the heck is that? It's the only explanation for that is a quantum non-locality event. It's entanglement. It means that what it really means is that it's an illusion. Once again, it's an illusion that your body starts somewhere and ends somewhere, because you don't have a body. Your body is infinite. It just is a matter of degrees, and that scientific experiment proves it. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, wait a second, does that mean that it would happen like with any part of your body? Says anything with DNA, like your hair? Yeah. Fingernails? Yeah. Skin? Yeah. I'm thinking, so intention of harm is what it's all about. Pretty soon all I have to do is think about pushing the button and you have a stress response. In order to increase my focus of my intention of harm, I could take some hair and some fingernails and maybe a photograph of you, put it on a doll, and stick it maybe with a pin to it. We're talking about scientific validation of voodoo here, folks, because what is causing is a stress response. And in my 5 years of practice, I'm now convinced that stress is the ultimate cause of disease. I'm causing disease in you because I'm causing the core of stress to arise in your system through my intention of harm. And what if it's intention for me harming myself? And isn't that what self-defeating belief systems are all about? I've got a negative little voice dialoguing, oh, you look rotten today. Oh, your hair is horrible today. And, oh, you look horrible, and you're so fat, and you're so stupid. And we do all of us are doing this all the time. The dialogue voice is stressing us all the time from the inside out. So now when you've got somebody like, say, Louise Hay comes along, she writes this little book that says, hey, what if you changed your dialogue? What if your dialogue was now intentionally good dialogue, and you started policing your mind and trying to throw out all of a sudden all these healing things take place just because I stopped sticking a pin in my voodoo doll with my picture on it. My question to him was, oh, wait a second, would this work the other way around? What if we prayed over the cells and did beneficent meditations for healing of the cell? And he says, well, my equipment only measures stress responses. And it wasn't for, 15 years later when I first came across heart rate variability that I had heart rate variability measures the non-stress response, the healing response at the core of the system. I could do that. I could now myself do that experiment. I could do the experiment where we have beneficent intentions, and watch the heart rate variability go into homeostasis, right? And that works. It's mind-blowing. So once again, it's being fooled by what you think it's all about. It's not that way. It's not that way at all. This idea that, in quantum physics, they're finding out that there's these thought experiments where they try to explain the unimaginable things they discover about the nature of reality at its quantum field state. This idea of Schrodinger's cat paradox, where Schrodinger is this scientist who discovers, oh my God, that's what it's like at the core of reality? I've got to go home and tell my wife. But it's all mathematical formulas. He can't tell his wife. So he comes up with the metaphorical stories to explain what he saw. And the metaphorical story is, here's what I saw about the nature of reality at a quantum field. It's like a cat that's in a box with a lid on it. And the cat's got a bottle of cyanide with a hammer suspended above it. It's in this box. And I'm going to get the box a shake. And now I don't know if the hammer dropped and broke the bottle of cyanide and killed the cat, or it didn't, and the cat's okay. I don't know which it is until I open up the lid, right? So when consciousness arrives in the scene and the lid opens up and the consciousness looks, until that happens, until that moment happens, the cat exists in a twilight zone state of living dead cat. It's neither one of those yet. until consciousness arrives on the scene to witness what took place. And only then does one of those two possibilities pop into existence. Now, how crazy is that? I mean, that's the pronouncement in the last 3 months of the World Science Organization. Number one, consciousness is a requirement for the universe to exist. This means there's no objective reality. This means that if the tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound or not? If there's nobody there, there's no tree and there's no forest. There's only the potential of a forest to exist until consciousness arrives on the scene to experience it. So that means, and then the second pronouncement is the future creates the past. Now, while you're trying to get your brain wrapped around that one, it's the Schrodinger cat paradox explains it. At the moment that the lid flies off and I look to see which of the two events took place, up until that moment, the cat was in a twilight zone state of living dead cat. It hadn't been decided yet until I look. And when I look, one of those two pops into existence. Let's say it's the dead cat. But that means that the dead cat died a few minutes ago when the hammer dropped. But it didn't because it was in the twilight zone state. It didn't happen until I, right now, opened up the lid, then that past event took place. So once again, the whole thing is an illusion. It means that right now is the only thing that truly exists. The past, even a second ago, is a memory. A second from now is an anticipation. Now is all that exists, and now happens before a thought.
Does the expectation of what's going to happen, like, quantum physics, when you observe, it affects the item. Is your expectation of the cat dead or alive?
Yeah. The next moment from now is the closed box. And we're going to arrive there, and the lid's going to fly off, and what's in the box is not a cat. It's an infinite, vast field of all possibilities of what could take place in the next moment. And they've all got equal weight. When Einstein put this question to the scientific community, what is that determines which of these events out of the infinite possibilities is the one that gets to happen next? The scientific community's consensus was that it was a random event, and that was where Einstein pounded the table and said, God doesn't play dice with the universe, right? I believe that there's a reason that can be figured out for everything. Why is the next moment from now consistently this one? Because consciousness arrives on the scene without a clean slate. Consciousness arrives on the scene expecting the next moment from now to be the next word in my sentence, because you believe you're in a body that's X number of years old, and so do I, and so does everybody here. And I believe I'm this old because I've got a whole string of memories that prove it to me, memories that go right up to the last few minutes when I sat in this chair and you put the microphone on me and all that stuff. I know I've got this body because I've got all kinds of memories to prove it. But in reality, from the Schrodinger cat paradox idea, my expectation that I live in this body and I'm expecting the next word is galvanizing special significance on one outcome of all those infinite possibilities. And that's precisely what the universe is looking for, as a path of least resistance to save energy. Because it's an ecological system, always looking for the path of least resistance. And I just gave it that path of least resistance by my intention. Actually, it's not my intention. It's my belief system that I have a body and it's X number of years old, and I'm having a conversation with you, and the next word is going to come out in the next sentence, and we're both agreeing on that, therefore we're both focusing on this. It's not so much that I personally am creating my own reality moment by moment. It's all living beings in the entire universe are creating the next moment from now by consensus, by group agreement. It's like, if you've ever done the Ouija board, you put your hand on the little plastic thing and it starts moving around and spelling out words, and I think it's you doing it and you think it's me doing it, but actually it's our collective unconscious mind kind of manifesting out through us. And so you could kind of look upon everything in the universe has got its hand on the little plastic thing. And what's being spelled out is everybody else is thinking everybody else is doing it, but actually everybody's doing it by consensus. So I do have my influence. It's like voting in the presidential election. My vote counts because I know that statistically, whatever I decide to do, there's going to be 750,000 people that do exactly the same thing, that are also going to arrive by statistical average to make the same decision as I do. So if I decide not to vote, then there's going to be 750,000 people that do just what I did. If I divide to vote for this person, then that's going to count. It's this consensus, once again, being fooled into thinking that the universe has got an objective existence outside of my consciousness. And that's the beauty of this scientific community, worldwide scientific community, saying that consciousness is a required element in the universe for the universe to exist. It's supposed to be here. It's not that the Earth is this happy little wonderful serendipitous accident that happened someplace and there's no more living beings in the whole universe. It's just this little thing that happened. No. This means that for the universe to exist, period, consciousness must be here. That means it must be spread throughout the system by definition. And you know, like in one of the final scenes of the movie Contact, where she's on this other dimensional place on the beautiful beach with the sky up there, and the alien being in the form of her father is, you know, is saying, you know, she's saying the transport, I saw the transport that you built that got me here. He says, no, we didn't build it. It's been here for eons. We don't know who built it. Maybe they'll come back someday. He says the only thing that gives it all meaning is each other. It's that we share this experience together, that what it really boils down to when you really think about it is the most important things about what it's all about is who do I love and who loves me back. But once again, when you arrive at this moment, nothing changes except your belief in the definitions that separate things. It all just becomes one thing, and you realize it's all connected. And sound has stood the time in every culture on earth as being the el primo tool for helping us to get to that state, where healing is the door prize. What was the question?